Good afternoon. This is Veronica Williams, president of the Willamette Women Dems, and I'd like to welcome you. I know we're having people join as I'm speaking. In case you're wondering, you are being muted and your videos will slowly be clicked off because we have too many participants and we don't want to have all sorts of folks flashing across the screen as we're trying to talk with all of you. Welcome to our first attempt at a virtual Willamette Women Dems meeting. These are challenging times for all of us, and we feel that it's really important that we stay connected with all of you and bring to your attention important issues facing all of us, especially with the upcoming May election. Everyone but our speakers will be muted. And then, as I said, we're slowly turning off videos as people come online. So your pictures will be vanishing shortly. If we have time for questions in the end, I'll give further instructions about that.
It's a meeting.
Producing this program has taken a lot of efforts on the part of all of our board members. I always emphasize that we're a working board, and we certainly work very hard to pull this program together, but I specifically really want to thank Vicki Monroe, who helped us set up this virtual Zoom meeting, and Kay Bourdine, Anita Beck, and Diana Cubbage, who really helped us with some of the testing and are helping us with running some of the program today. So I really, we couldn't do this if we didn't work as a group, and they've been wonderful. I would like to introduce our speakers, and then we'll let them get going. So we are very thrilled to welcome Lynne Peterson. Lynn was elected Metro Council President in November of 2018. She's a transportation engineer and land use expert. Many of you know her public service started as Lake Oswego City Councilor, and then she was the first elected chair of Clackamas County Commission. Her leadership in creating communities has led to senior roles in the administration of two governors, John Kitzhaber and Jay Inslee in Washington. She's a native of Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm sure she's just thrilled at the wonderful job all the Wisconsin voters did in terrible conditions to get out and vote. And I think we hold that state in awe right now. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin with a degree in civil and environmental engineering, and she has 2 master's degrees from Portland State in urban and regional planning and in civil engineering. Christine Lewis is also joining us. She was elected Metro Councilor in November of 2018, and she represents District 2, which includes the cities of Gladstone, Johnson City, Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, Happy Valley, Oregon City, River Grove, West Lynn, a portion of Southwest Portland, and some unincorporated areas of Clackamas County. She's worked for Democratic leadership in both chambers of the Oregon legislature. She served as Deputy Legislative Director to Speaker of the House Tina Kotek, and she worked in the City of Portland's Office of Government Affairs as a lobbyist for the city. She's a native of Dallas, Texas, and graduated from Reed College with a degree in anthropology. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn, and we'll get going.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you everybody who made this happen. I know it was a team effort, as you said, and it's much appreciated. This election now more than ever is so important. And so we thank you for giving us the time and opportunity to talk to you today. I also want to just acknowledge the amazing leadership that you are getting from Councilor Lewis in Clackamas County and for the entire region. I have been so pleased to work with her, having known her only a little bit before all of the election cycle, but she worked so hard on behalf of the environment in OLCV, which is where I first met her. And I just I want to say thank you to Councilor Lewis for her commitment to the region and for commitment to Clackamas County more specifically. So from a Clackamas County girl to another Clackamas County girl, thank you. I'm just going to quick go through an introduction, turn us over to Councilor Lewis. We have been working very hard on behalf of the region at the region's request from all the stakeholders, including the cities and the counties, on what we call the regional investment strategies. That started back in 2018, and you'll all remember we went to the ballot with the Affordable Housing Bond Measure. And with your help and support, that passed by 67% region-wide. And that raised $652.8 million in the middle of an affordable housing crisis to be able to get at least 3,900 units out on I was going to say on the street, out on the ground over the next 5 to 7 years. That is a small part of the overall need that we knew we had going into this pandemic. We knew that we needed 44,000 units of affordable housing in this region. And we knew that 3,900 was only a drop in the bucket, but it was a start. And it was the first regional affordable housing bond measure that ever passed in the United States. So I know it's a big deal. And then we went right into the nature in the neighborhood, well, the open space bond in 2019, which also by 67. Are y'all getting feedback? Can everybody mute?
I was getting some feedback.
So the Parks and Space Bond measure passed by 67% as well, region-wide in 2019, at a level of $475 million. What I will say is that Clackamas and Washington County both passed it at about 62%, which is huge. The progressive conversation going on outside of the city of Portland is really pushing this regional investment strategies and is so important to this conversation. So as we move into 2020, we had a conversation going on about transportation, and in the background, a coalition had been built to move forward with a housing service measure, and really it's a homeless service measure is what it is. And it really focuses on those wraparound services, and Councilor Lewis will kick us off with that conversation about what's on the ballot in May. That we put on the ballot just over 2 months ago, which is hard to believe. And then I will talk about what we're preparing to put on the ballot for November. So Councilor Lewis, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here with you and for the super kind words. I think voters of District 2 don't really know that they have 2 advocates on their behalf, since you do live in my district. Not everybody in Willamette Woman Democrats is a District 2 resident, I understand. So to our friends a little bit to the west, I apologize. But it's a real honor representing you and working on these issues of regional importance. And I'm really excited to share with you information on this May ballot measure. It's number 26210. And the work that was done by Metro, you know, not to use a sports analogy, but we kind of picked up the ball and ran it down to the very last second on the clock and did put it in the end zone. But the work had been going on for over a year before we really engaged deeply by a coalition called Here Together, made up of folks from the business community who wanted to see leadership at the municipal and regional level on homeless issues, from members of the frontline communities facing homelessness, having experienced homelessness themselves or serving those communities. And most importantly for us, all 3 county chairs were in leadership positions within that organization. So that's why you'll see the branding of the campaign is still using that Here Together logo and campaign theme, because really this is an effort that has transcended kind of any traditional way of putting a measure together from before. And President Peterson said we referred it over 2 months ago. It's not even been 2 months since we've referred it. Time is moving strangely these days, but it's more important than ever since we know that the economic fallout from this public health crisis will lead to housing instability on top of the housing instability that existed already in the region without adequate level of service. So with that, I'm hoping that my slides can show up on your screen. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one. I already explained who we are in the We Are Here Together. It's a diverse coalition. And at this point, the campaign has exceeded 50 businesses who are in leadership positions, over 110 organizations. So the campaign is building steam from where the coalition started. But again, it's a diverse coalition who wanted to start off by tackling some of the region's biggest issues. The fact that there's over 5,000 adults and children in the region who sleep outside or in a shelter on any given night. And we are looking at what's called a point in time count in order to get those numbers. And we know that that point in time count doesn't adequately encapsulate folks who are doubled up unsafely or on a friend's couch or sleeping in their car. We lead the nation in something we really ought not to lead the nation in, and that's homeless children. 7,000 plus K-12 children are experiencing homelessness in our region, and 56,000 households are housing and unstable. That sometimes is reflected as just one medical bill or emergency away. So that's the problem that we have been tasked with solving, because we know what works. Homelessness is not unsolvable, but we've just never garnered the resources to face these challenges at scale. Next slide, please. The region's homelessness crisis demands our attention with services. You know, we have subsidized public housing, and Metro and the city of Portland have both stepped up with bonds to make sure that we're increasing the number of units that might be available to those who need our help the most in affording rent. But there's still a wait list. Between 2 and 10 years is the average time in the region you spend on a waiting list. And I've heard in Clackamas County is actually outside that range on the longer end. And we've got real concerns for each individual who faces homelessness. Last year, or in 2018 in Multnomah County, 92 people died on the street. So presumably in line, waiting for housing, waiting for help. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go forward one? Yeah, there we go. This is a slide that shows that since 2005, families have been unable to keep up as rents have risen. What their buying power in the market has brought them has really decreased. So you see the affordable rent trend of between $680 and $740. Staying fairly flat, while the average 1-bedroom in Portland has more than doubled in price in that amount of time. So that's just the scope of where the market's gone. Next slide, please. So the goal of the Here Together Coalition was to create a coalition that supports region-wide response, not enough to work in one city or one county, to meet the demand with proven solutions and funding that fits the scale and scope of the crisis. As I said, the coalition is made up of many groups representing nonprofits, communities of color, elected officials, business, and other community members. They worked for over a year to do engagement, and the green bubbles show how many engagement events, listening sessions, and policy development work sessions they held in each of the 3 counties. So you can move forward to the next slide, please. And as I said before, homelessness is not unsolvable. There are solutions that exist. It's a housing first solution, which means that we're going to make sure that somebody has access to a unit, a safe place to sleep at night, without preconditions, without saying that first you need to address this, this, and this, and then you've earned your way into housing. It's saying, come one, come all, get housed, and then we'll address any of the issues to keep you stable. And then the second component is flexible services that meet people where they're at, offer culturally appropriate services to meet a wide range of needs. And I'll detail a little bit more about the services that we're talking about in the following slides. Next slide, please. And again, we're focused on client-centered work that provides wraparound services that has been proven to be part of the solution. Next slide. So the exact list of services will be customized by each county, but the services that are eligible for funding through this measure include the following: expanding case management and outreach services, which looks like prioritizing permanent supportive housing services, expanding culturally responsive services and providers, and to leverage existing resources to help people transition out of homelessness. Next slide. In addition to case management, we'll be seeing clinical services funded, including access to behavioral mental health services and interventions, improving and expanding addiction services and support for people in recovery, also crisis intervention. And we'll also improve and expand services and interventions for people with physical impairments and disabilities. Next slide. Another set of services will help us make sure that folks, as they're getting housed, have income opportunities, whether that's job training, workplace support, anything that they need in terms of education or financial literacy in order to have a paycheck, but also assist individuals with accessing any of their benefits, including Social Security or veterans benefits that they might be eligible for. Next slide. Also working on homeless prevention services that really help make sure that folks who are about to fall into homelessness might get rent assistance to just target just a few months, make sure that they don't get evicted, fall into homelessness. It costs so much more to help somebody out of homelessness compared to just keeping somebody stably housed. Next slide, please. And then there was also a set of services to expand access to affordable and culturally appropriate housing placements. So we'll work to maximize federal, state, and local housing programs and subsidies, ensure people exiting institutions, jails, are able to have bridge housing or transitional housing placements and don't end up on the street, and provide long-term housing subsidies for elderly and people with disabilities. Next slide. The measure has been crafted with a focus on equity. Not only is equity an integral component of Here Together's mission, it's also one of the 6 guiding principles of how we do our work at Metro. So at every stage of the process, there's been work done to make sure that we're really centering equity, and we're acknowledging the disproportionate impact policies over time have had on communities of color. We're collaborating with other institutions and communities with humility and recognizing that their lived experience has meaning and value in crafting policy. And we're also making sure that we're bringing diverse voices to the forefront in not only crafting the measure, but you'll see there's some accountability work. We'll make sure that the culturally specific community work is represented through those processes. Next slide. So the funding that was targeted is $250 million. That's the amount raised per year by the taxing mechanisms that were used. This is the amount that's going to be needed in order to effectively address the chronic homeless problem. So we're going to be serving those at extreme risk of experiencing homelessness, prioritizing people of color, children, women escaping domestic violence, seniors, people with disabilities, and the LGBTQIA community. Next slide, please. No, go ahead for it. Yeah, perfect. So the region-wide measure uses two different revenue functions to raise the required monies to support the services previously described. The first is a high income earners tax. It's a 1% marginal tax on taxable income over $200,000 per household or $125,000 for a single individual. And again, marginal means that it's on revenue over those thresholds. And then the second tax is a large business tax. That's 1% business net profits, and it exempts small, medium-sized businesses that don't have $5 million in gross income. So again, this is a 1% tax on profit of businesses that have income over $5 million. Next slide, please. So this is additional examples of the individual high income earners. The takeaway here is that 90% of individuals this won't apply to. And again, this is using math and estimations from before we entered the unusual times that we're in now. I suspect that the economic crisis that surrounds us might shift these numbers slightly. But high income earners, there's only about 10% of them in the region who will be taxed. But single parent with dependents, taxable income under $200,000 are exempt. An individual who files, the example here is somebody with taxable income of $150,000, only at $25,000 over $125,000 a year is taxed. And then the example couple with a taxable income of $230,000, it's 1% tax on the $30,000 over the $200,000 a year. So just some examples of what that high income earners tax looks like. Next slide, please. And then similarly, the business tax, 94% of businesses were modeled to be exempt, and that we were only taxing about 6% of the largest businesses that were profitable in the region. So this is an example here of a business, a random business, that would have a gross income of $6 million with net local profits, $600,000, with a tax at 1%, $6,000 a year. So just an example to help explain that taxing mechanism. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So how the measure works. Oh, I'm getting some back. Metro will be collecting, working with the counties. The three counties share of the funds pay in, not proportional to the population. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then we have accountability mechanism. One costs includes our data work at 5%. Additionally, the costs will be audited by a regional oversight committee. And there will be an annual audit publicly available. All of that will be further refined. Metro implements the measure. Next slide, please. So Council President Peterson and I are here today, one, to make sure you know about this upcoming measure on the May ballot. We're asking for you all to endorse the measure, consider supporting the campaign through a contribution, pledging to vote yes, putting a yard sign or a window sign. I don't know who's looking in windows these days, but I see lots of kids trying to count teddy bears in windows in my neighborhood, so we'll put a sign up. But then, of course, with any measure, we're just asking for your support and a yes vote this May 19th. So thank you so much for allowing me to walk through the measure as we've referred it. I'm going to pass it over to President Peterson, who will talk about other work we're doing. And then I think both of us will work together on fielding questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Councilor Lewis. While we change the slides, the other thing that you could help us with on the housing services ballot measure is getting the information out to your through your social media contacts or your email. Anything that you can do will help. In this time of COVID, it is really hard to fundraise and it's really hard to get the message out. But we are, with our recent polling from the Here Together campaign, if we get our message out, we will potentially win by 57%. So anything that you can do to go to the Here Together website, call it whatever information you can gather from that and put it out to your networks, that would be very helpful. So thank you. So again, what Metro has been focused on is the affordability of this region as well as the economic vitality of this region. And what I will quickly walk through with you is a brand new presentation. This is the second time it's been given, so bear with me. I was really used to the old one. And it is about transportation. And as you know, transportation is part and parcel of how our communities grow, but now more than ever, it's going to be part and parcel of how we get people back to work. So that's how we are restructuring and reworking this transportation package for the fall of November. So for a year and a half, Metro has worked with community leaders, partners, and the public to shape a transformative investment package to get our region moving again. Together, we have built a plan to make it safer and easier for people to get where they need to go. It's a plan that prioritizes the outcomes the people of Greater Portland want from their transportation system. Outcomes like safety, reliability, access to transportation options, and economic opportunity. And really keying in on the affordability of this region. Right? Between the housing measure, the housing service measure that's up on the ballot in May that Councilor Lewis just talked about, and the transportation ballot measure, this is about the affordability of this region for the long term. It's a plan that we developed with a lens on racial equity and a focus on meeting our region's ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And now more than ever, it's important to know that Get Moving Transportation investment measures is a jobs measure. They'll put tens of thousands of Oregonians to work. Next. Next slide. We still need to think big. So the Portland area is pretty special. We enjoy close-knit communities, beautiful natural areas, a vibrant and diverse cultural life. It's not a mystery why millions want to call the region home. Next. This is the region's population forecast to 2060. We've seen decade after decade of steady growth. Even the Great Recession barely slowed the influx of our new neighbors. As recently as 2018, Greater Portland saw 2,000 births and arrivals every month. That's a city bus of new faces every day. Even as that pace ebbs and flows from year to year, we expect to add 500,000 more residents in the coming decades. Next. So the next 3 slides basically show you in geographic form what you just saw in that forecast. But this is the metro urban growth since 1910 to 2020. Next. And next. Yeah, so we have grown. Decades of growth have brought many benefits to Greater Portland, including historic increases in property values, thousands of jobs, and greater economic opportunity. But it has also come with some costs. Next. Most notably, a crisis in affordable housing, encroachment from development on our natural areas, and it has put tremendous pressure on our transportation system. Next. Portland area communities have come together as a region to tackle some of these challenges, and we've talked about this with the regional investment strategies. We've passed the country's first ever regional affordable housing bond. We've renewed a bond to continue to protect clean air and water and increase people's access to our parks and natural areas. And next month, the region's voters will consider the measure we just talked about. Next. But right now, what we do know is that people are going to need jobs. We are in the middle of a pandemic that has seen incredible layoffs that will, in the end, resemble more of the Great Depression than the Great Recession. The Get Moving 2020 Regional Transportation Funding Measure is a blueprint that will put tens of thousands of people back to work. We've estimated 37,000 to 57,000 jobs over the next decade. Next. We will put the region back to work so everyone can get where they need to go safely. Next. We will put the region back to work so we can all breathe cleaner air and meet our climate goals. Amazing zero emission buses. Next. We will put the region back to work and ensure that our investments in our region's recovery benefit everyone, including communities that have long been from full participation in Greater Portland. Next. We will put the region back to work so people can get to work without spending extra time stuck in traffic. Next. We will put the region back to work so we are prepared for the next emergency. And this is the Burnside Bridge, which is part of the region's basically emergency response system. This bridge will be replaced with a bridge that is resilient to earthquakes. Next. And we'll put the region back to work while ensuring that our communities are stronger and more resilient, avoiding the displacement and disruption that have followed past investments. Next. What can we build? Next. We're getting buses out of traffic so everyone can be on time. And as you see on the side there, there's some statistics. This proposal will put 25 to 30 miles of new bus lanes in the region and 260 new transit priority signals, which also allow for better traffic flow. Next. We'll be building a new light rail line to serve the residents along the I-5 corridor from Portland to Tualatin, including the 75,000 new faces we expect to see in that area in the next 15 years. 24 miles. Next. We're making our communities safer, avoiding hundreds of deaths and serious injuries on the region's most dangerous roads and streets. Honestly, I love these statistics. 40 to 45 miles of new sidewalks, 4,000 new streetlights to improve safety in each of the corridors we'll talk about, and 280 safe marked crossings. Next. We'll be making it easier and safer for bikes to share the road with 130 to 140 miles of improved bikeways. Next. And we'll be relieving bottlenecks with 115 to 120 miles of roadway improvements and 60 miles of roadway planning. So where will we build it? Next. Where could we build it? Next. Here are the 16 investment corridors that our task force and the Metro Council have moved forward for this ballot measure for November. You can see that it is quite the map. What was intended here was, rather than one intersection here and one interchange there, we said that we wanted to actually create a system that moved people and freight more efficiently in the future, and did it with an emphasis on safety and racial equity. So I'm just going to quickly go through and around the region. This proposal would make improvements in the entirety of the TV highway corridor from stem to stern, from Forest Grove all the way into Beaverton. Southwest 185th, which is becoming a major northwest corridor for Washington County. Planning and design money for 217. Obviously, the light rail corridor, southwest corridor for Barber Boulevard, but also an extension into Sherwood for planning and design money to basically allow Sherwood to be able to figure out how they actually move people from one side of Sherwood to the other. What you don't see here on this map is on the west side of 99W are 2 new schools, and the majority of the kids are on the east side. And so what they would like to do is make sure that there is more safety in crossing 99W and slow 99W traffic so that it is not dividing their community. When you head into Clackamas County, you can see Highway 43 will not only get construction money for the West Lynn corridor, but also planning and design money for the northern portion of that corridor, Lake Oswego into the Selwood Bridge. There'll be a major amount of improvements in the McLaughlin corridor, the Sunrise corridor, 82nd corridor from Clackamas all the way up to the airport. And in Clackamas, the 171st to 182nd corridor. And when you get into Multnomah County, which needs a lot of investment in terms of north-south as well as east-west connections, you'll see that there's Burnside, Powell, 82nd, 122nd, and 162nd. I just want to spend a moment on 82nd Avenue. 82nd Avenue is the highest transit ridership corridor in our entire region. And that is because a lot of folks transfer from east-west to north-south connections, and they cross the street in order to do so. And many of you know that the corridor is not the easiest in order to cross, and a lot of our pedestrian fatalities are folks on McLaughlin and 82nd who are trying to cross a 5-lane high-speed facility to get to the bus. So a lot of those improvements in there are very pedestrian oriented and very bus focused. Sorry to spend so much time on that map, but what you're also seeing is that it connects all of our regional and town centers where our main streets are located to our employment areas. One of the things that folks need to realize is that transit, in order to be as efficient as possible, needs to pick up and drop off along a corridor. And that corridor doesn't necessarily lead to downtown Portland. We are trying to make connections to employment areas, and you can see that on this map. Next. We are really focused on also the areas between those corridors. And in order to get to the those spaces between the corridors, we have created a series of programs with our task force that really deal with safety, equity, and greenhouse gas emissions. The programs that we're proposing for, sorry, I'm gonna make sure I'm talking, safety, are Safe Routes to School, which is a very popular program at the statewide level, as well as in individual jurisdictions. And so we wanted to make sure that we were focusing in on getting kids safely to school. Safety hotspots, which are not just for vehicles, but for pedestrians and bikes as well. How can we practically get something on the ground faster than waiting for a major rehab, but really focusing on decreasing fatalities and severity of injuries. Also making sure that we're looking at those regional walking and biking connections, whether that be a bike pedestrian walkway or a bridge. And there's many places in the region where we're talking about bridging, whether it be a river or a highway. Also revitalizing main streets in terms of being able to make sure that we have more biking and walking options to get to local businesses. Next. Equity. This was the #1 issue on the task force from every single member, and that was as we focus in on the investments that we don't displace people, because the minute you increase transportation investments, you increase the value of property within that area, and when you increase the value of property, you increase rents and you displace people. And that is the #1 issue in this region, is affordable housing. So we are baking into this measure anti-displacement strategies, as well as affordable housing strategies, as well as student fare affordability, so that kids can get to where they need to go. Next. And lastly, making sure that we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions throughout the region includes bus electrification within the region, essentially jump-starting on behalf of TriMet and SMART, low emission to no emission vehicle purchases, better bus options, being able to make sure that when you actually are waiting for the bus, that you have the amenities that you need to make it easier to wait for the bus, and then planning for the future. Next. So how much is this going to cost us? The corridors themselves are estimated to total about $4 billion. The programs will be a $1 billion investment, 50 million over 20 years. That will create 37 to 57,000 jobs. And those jobs will be average annual income per construction job just to build this is 98,000. Next. So let's invest in our future. Now more than ever, people are looking for the leadership. They're looking for hope. They're looking for action. Let's invest in our future. Next. Let's get shovels in the ground. Next. And let's get people back to work. That is where we're headed. That's what we need to do. And finally, next, we need to get people moving. Next. And if you have any need for more information, you can go to getmoving2020.org. So thank you. Veronica.
Great. Thank you very much, both Lynn and Christine. So we are going to attempt to take some questions. So I'll try and let you know what you need to do if you would like to ask a question. If you go onto your screen, you should be able to find near the bottom a little set of 2 heads or something that says participants. And if you click on that, it will give you a list of participants, and it will, near the bottom, it will have a place where you can raise your hand. So if you can raise your hand, then I will see that you have raised your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask your question of Lynn or Christine. So if somebody wants to ask a question, just get to your participant side. If that does not work for you, there also is a chat feature down there and you can click on chat. So if there's someone who would, okay, I see, okay, excuse me. Wait a minute, okay, I think I'm gonna need somebody else to unmute. Rob, can somebody do that, please? Thank you, Rob, go ahead.
Hey, great to see you both. Fantastic presentation, super appreciated. I guess my question would be, both short-term and long-term, what can we do with the state legislature to partner with the great work that's happening with Metro?
Thanks,
Great.
Rob.
Thanks for that question. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to work together, particularly given kind of the uncertainties that are ahead of us. Metro's got some unique challenges outside of the regional investment strategies we've just gone over. In particular, we've got a budget that's really dependent on large gatherings at some point coming back into existence, since we run a convention center and an expo center and performing arts venues. But when I think about the transportation investments we want to make, we are definitely putting local dollars on the table in a way that's never been done before in a big, significant way. But in order to really, truly leverage everything we can, we're going to go to the feds in particular to ask them for partnership and for funding. And the feds would probably love to see additional investment from the state, in particular Southwest Corridor, other significant projects as well. President Peterson?
You hit the nail on the head. I would only add that included in this measure is the assumption that there will be another $2.25 billion on the transportation side that will come from the feds, the state, and local entities. And that is including the assumption that Councilor Lewis just mentioned about Southwest Corridor. But it also includes the assumption that the state will continue to fund the interstate system with the federal government. And so, you know, moving forward with congestion pricing is probably the single most important thing to this region for being able to manage demand as well as to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that is going to be so clear as we go through the conversations with the Rose Quarter and the I-5 Bridge Replacement Project. If congestion pricing, if the legislature backs down from that in any way, then the whole deal falls through. Not just from a funding perspective, but from the fact that I-5 cut through Northeast Portland in a way that reduced generational wealth and increased greenhouse gas emissions. And we need to be able to show that we are moving forward in a positive direction in a way on I-5 while we are moving forward investments in the actual community away from the interstate system. So thank you.
And can I add for homeless services? One important piece of the measure that I believe I neglected to say is it is a 10-year measure. It sunsets in 10 years, and we would be going back to the voters for future funding. It is my hope that in the next 10 years, we figure out a better way to fund some of those services I was talking about, in particular, drug, alcohol, mental health addiction through Medicaid. And I think some of it's going to be a new Medicaid waiver from the feds, and some of it might take some state action as well. So I would hope that we really challenge ourselves to make sure that the Medicaid system takes over some of those responsibilities that right now we're going to pick up with some general dollars.
Thank you. Nolan, you have a question?
Hi, thanks.
really good work going on here. I'm impressed with how it's come together. Lynn, you mentioned that if we get our message out on the supportive services measure, then 57% of the voters are with us. What kind of opposition campaign are we seeing? I haven't seen anything. Do we think something will materialize, and do we need to be prepared to counter that as well?
Yeah, thank you for that. The Northwest Grocers Association is the one who has stepped up into the space on the the con side of this. They're the ones doing the best economically in this pandemic that we find ourselves in. And so they have the capacity to put money into this campaign if they so choose. And their only message that seems to resonate, but we still win, but barely in the polling, is hastily put together measure. So anything you can do to dissuade that will help. This was not a hastily put together measure. What I would say is people have wanted us to think out of the box and not do business as usual, and we didn't. And because of that, there's an opening, right? Because of the fact that we actually stepped up to the plate and did something different, that is what everybody asked for, but that's what the Northwest Grocers Association is using as their opening, is that it's, we didn't do it the normal way.
Thank you. Carol Greenow, you had a question?
Yes, I did. Time, but as I looked at the incredible.
Oh, it's hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This is an unprecedented time, but as I look at the incredible reduction in traffic, I wonder when we return to a new normal, if we will need to reassess what our traffic patterns and needs will be. And if we maybe will be working more from home or working in other settings than we've done in the past.
I think that's a really good question. I think we have, here's what I would say, is that we have the capacity on our existing.
Oh, shoot.
Lynn, you muted yourself.
No, I muted her, I think, accidentally. I was trying to mute somebody else. I have to find her now.
Amazing, and you missed it.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
What I would say is that we have the capacity to move people for the future with telecommuting with telecommuting, it means that what we need to do is be able to move people by transit so that it's affordable and predictable. This measure doesn't put capacity into the roadway system necessarily. It may make it more predictable for your vehicle commute, but what it does is it puts a lot of emphasis into bike, ped, transit. So for instance, telecommuting may not mean 5 days a week. It may mean 2 or 3 days a week now that we know how to do it and we know how to do it better. So how businesses come back, how fast they come back, what this measure will do is lay the foundation for a transportation system that meets our greenhouse gas emissions reductions, as well as our affordability, and allow us to grow into the future without any additional roadway capacity. So the telecommuting helps, but it's not going to get us all the way there. Congestion pricing on I-5, I-205, 84, 26, 217, that will get us a much longer way.
Thank you. I think, Vicki, you have a question that somebody sent in on a chat.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's from Anupam Narayan, and I really apologize if I've butchered your name, but it says, I support solutions to help the homeless and appreciate the efforts of the team. On the Metro funding, could you elaborate on, one, what will be the major allocation of funds? And then in parens, how will they be used each year? Two, why is using the new jail building at Wapato not being used? And three, finally, is there any money allocated to reduce camping in residential areas or in front of businesses and reduce the criminal element and litter? Thank you.
So to address the first question, which is about the funding allocation and how the monies are spent. I went through in great detail the list of eligible services for funding. Each of the 3 counties who are responsible through their charter and charge and traditional responsibilities of providing the services, each of the 3 counties will come up with their own plan as to how they're going to spend the money based on their unique needs. So what we need in Clackamas County is really different than what they are going to need in Multnomah County, and of course different from Washington County. And the funds are distributed based on returning the funds to where they came from. So it's not a population breakdown. It's based on how much is raised in that county. It goes back to that county. And the plans at the county level will be developed not only by the county commissions, but also by a advisory committee, a steering committee that should have representation from the community, people with lived experience experiencing homelessness, as well as the service providers and business community that has helped develop this measure framework to begin with. The second question was about Wapato. Wapato jail is no longer a county asset at Multnomah County. It's now in private industry's hands. And I know that there are some efforts underway to build out nonprofit capacity to use that space. I'm not deep in those conversations, but it's no longer a government asset. And then thirdly, the question around funds, I didn't write down the exact words, but funds specific to helping folks who are camping. The folks who are camping right now would, and if this measure passes, be able to better access services because they would have case managers coming by to visit with them with better suites of services to offer. And in terms of folks who are perceived to be camping because they don't want help or they're service resistant, you can't find out who those folks are. There's a few bad apples in any bunch anywhere. But until you can actually help the people who want help, who are open to help, you can't separate those folks out. So in order to really meet the capacity needs, we need this measure. And then once we are able to serve folks, then we can say, we've offered you help in multiple different ways, multiple different caseworkers have come by, and you're still here. Then you have a different intervention.
Thank you. Nancy Murray, you had a question?
Yeah. I'm wondering what the timeline is for the building of these units. Is that up to each county? Have they already identified properties, for example, so that when the money comes in, they are ready to roll?
So the measure on the May ballot is a services measure, not going to fund any bricks and sticks infrastructure.
Okay.
That said, we do have a Metro housing bond already in place, thanks to the 2018 voters.
Mm-hmm.
And I will hand it over to President Peterson to talk about the successes of getting those dollars spent right away.
Actually, what I wanted to add to what Councilor Lewis just mentioned is that there is a huge part of the housing service measure that we're talking about that is for rental assistance. So while it's not for construction of units, it's for being able to get somebody into an actual market rate unit so that we can get them into a house or apartment, get them stabilized, and then allow them to succeed from there.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any right now. If somebody thinks of something in the next minute or so, they can raise their hand, but otherwise, I'd like to thank both Lynn and Christine, very informative, and I think it kind of worked, so I'm pretty excited. So I do have some just general announcements for everyone. As W2D members know, in March, we had planned to host the 3 Democratic candidates for Secretary of State. And it was just a perfect storm because right around the time that the coronavirus exploded in Oregon and we needed to basically shut down and stay in place, well, that was when our meeting was. And it was just not possible for us, being the totally untechy folks we are, to move quickly enough to pull off something like we're doing right now. But the Washington County Democrats had planned a major fundraiser on Saturday with the 3 Secretary of State candidates and being moderated by David Saracen. So that event is going to occur virtually. And we will be sending out connection information to our list tomorrow, which is Friday. And you can sign up for it. It's going to be a Facebook Live event. So you will sign up and you'll find out the connecting information, and you will simply go on Facebook at 2 o'clock and be able to watch. There is a method to send in questions ahead of time that will be looked at and will be answered, as many as they can. So just please watch your email tomorrow for that information to come out to you. I do want to point out that in my humble opinion, the Secretary of State's race in November will be the most important race in the state of Oregon. I mean, we're a blue state. I'm sure the Democratic candidate is going to get the majority of the votes. Senator Merkley is very popular. I'm sure some Republican is running against him, but I couldn't tell you who it is. So I'm not worried about him either. But in 2021, the legislature is going to be tasked with redistricting, drawing new districts for congressional and then state, House, and Senate seats. It is highly likely that we're going to get a 6th congressional seat, which means there's going to be a major redraw of our congressional districts. In addition, our population has grown a lot in the last 10 years, as Lynn and Christine carefully pointed out to you, which means that a lot of the boundary lines of House and Senate districts are going to change. It's the legislature's responsibility in our state to draw those lines. If they cannot successfully draw them, it goes to the Secretary of State to draw the lines. So if we have a Democratic Secretary of State, then Republican legislators are going to be more interested in working collaboratively with their Democratic cohorts to draw good lines that meet proper criteria. If we have a Republican Secretary of State, they're going to have no interest whatsoever, and they could very easily walk out so that there is no vote on any proposal that comes forward, and then it would become the Republican Secretary of State's responsibility to draw the lines. So this is critical, and it's a very important race. And so, I really encourage you to watch on Saturday if you're able. If we, I believe it's going to be recorded maybe in YouTube, and we will put that out on our website if that occurs. But it's an important race. Please pay attention to it, and I hope you can join us. The other couple things that I want to mention, the May primary is May 19th. We have endorsed, W2D has endorsed some candidates that are running in nonpartisan races, and we will be sending out, some of this information is on our website, but we will send out sort of a MailChimp newsletter about this at the end of the month. Ballots are in the mail starting about the 29th of April, I believe. And then on May 14th, our program will also be a Zoom program, and our guest speaker will be Val Hoyle, who is the Oregon Labor Commissioner, and some members of her staff, and more information will be sent to you. We, of course, then will be speaking to you just a little bit before Election Day. But right now, I just want everybody to appreciate the work that actually began with some of our county election clerks and then former Secretary of State Phil Kiesling to bring vote by mail to the state of Oregon. Then the legislature took action and voters voted, and we are all so fortunate that we will get our ballots in our homes. We will be able to mail them or drop them off at a very safe mail slot where you're not going to have to be near anybody else. And so please vote, and please remind all of your friends how important voting is. And that closes our meeting. Thank you all very much. And again, thank you, Lynn and Christine. A lot of information, and I think it worked out great. Thank you both.
Thank you.